listening to the Leadership Woman podcast with me, Jill Saville. And today I'm very excited to introduce a good friend of mine. I've known her many, many years. She's now the People Director at the UK Civil Aviation Authority. And I know that her journey, the decisions that she made throughout her career are going to be really interesting. You can tell when somebody is successful when you have to make an appointment with their PA to get them to talk to you. So welcome, Jane. Lovely to see you.
Thank you, Jill. I'm delighted to be here.
Let's begin at the beginning. People in the UK will hear when you start talking roughly where you come from, but the rest of the world won't. So where were you born?
So I was born in Birmingham in the West Midlands, which is sort of in the middle of England.
Mm-hmm.
I was one of five, and I did quite well at school. And I was lucky enough to go to a grammar school, which is where you need to take an entrance exam to get in. And I did okay. I found it a little bit difficult because I'd been at a school where I was the only girl who passed the exam to get into a grammar school. So you sort of think that you're special. And then you get to a school where all of a sudden everybody's passed that exam and you're not quite the top performer. And now you're somewhere in the middle of the pack, which was fine. But at 14, I developed epilepsy. It was quite impactful. At my age, I sort of think going back to that time, everything I asked about doing as a career, I was told it wasn't possible because of my medical condition. So I couldn't be a doctor, couldn't be a teacher, I couldn't join the forces. Everything I seemed to ask, people told me I couldn't do. I'm a little bit headstrong, so not surprisingly, I rebelled. So I put down my books and I never picked them back up again for 2 years. So I left school with very few qualifications and decided that I would seek employment rather than going on to further education. So I went into the workplace at 16 on an apprenticeship. And actually it was probably the best thing that could have happened to me at that point in time. I ended up in a law firm, which was the start of my career proper.
So interesting. I'm hearing the parallels. We've known each other 20 years, but there are some things that I didn't know. We both went to a grammar school. They're not there anymore. I left school at 18, having not done very well, scraped through things. My parents wanted me to go to university and I was just fed up. I was just fed up of learning. And I knew that if I went, I would have no motivation to do anything. So yes, that's when I moved into the civil service. And we'll talk about that later because that's where we came across each other, isn't it? So you're 16, you move into a law firm. You said it's the best thing that could have happened to you at that point. So what happened then?
I met the first in a series of tremendous people who helped me in my career. And she was the leader of the apprenticeship programme. And the first day she gave me some advice and she said to me, Jane, find something that's broke and fix it. And that will set you up. And I walked into the office and I found something broke that I could fix. And it was quite a simple job. They had lots of posts that were sitting in a tray that hadn't been connected with the files that it related to. And whilst that seems quite a menial and odd thing to focus on, actually what it meant was that when the lawyer was picking up the file, they actually didn't have all of the information to take the next step in the case. So sometimes there might be quite a relevant letter that hadn't actually made its way to the file, and then they would take an action and it had already been overtaken. So by the end of that week, there was nothing in that post tray because I had found every single file and put every single piece of paper into it. And I kept up with that. I think that placement was really good for me because I've actually always had a thirst for learning, and that's followed me through my life. And although I felt crushed by my diagnosis, and quite frankly, I'm very, very lucky. It's largely been controlled most of my adult life. And there are lots of people who have conditions that are debilitating and impact their daily lives. And I'm lucky not to have that. What that enabled me to do was to just learn different things. So I taught myself to type. I started in the job as an office junior, so doing things like the post and whatever, and then I became the receptionist, and then I became a secretary, and then gradually, in no time at all, the firm must have spotted some potential and they offered to sponsor me for a law degree. I didn't take it up, but it was there.
You've taken everybody back to pre-computer days, almost there. You've certainly taken me back, because I used to link post with case papers. That was my first job in a social security office. And it just took all day. You were walking around looking in everybody's tray and everybody's drawers across 3 floors. I remember it distinctly. And they played a joke on me, like they played a joke on everybody, and said, "Have you tried the lost case paper drawer?" So yes, my goodness, that takes me back. Okay, so you were the office junior. They even wanted to sponsor you to take a law degree. So where did you go from there?
I think that I had fallen out of love with formal learning that was subject based. I didn't see myself being a lawyer. I was working around them and I admired them, and certain elements of the job appealed to me, but I didn't want to be a narrow expert in one field. What I actually started to discover was the management side of things. So I actually liked working with people. I liked working with teams. I enjoyed being part of a team, and eventually a job came up working for a different law firm where it wasn't straight away going to be a leadership role. It was a new firm that was being set up, and they offered me the opportunity to set up a new Birmingham office. So they were based in London, but they wanted to set a new office up in Birmingham. So they wanted somebody local, and they wanted somebody that understood the type of law that I had been working in. And I jumped at that. I went to do the job, and we started out with 2 solicitors and myself on day one. And then by the time I left, after about 6 years, we'd gone up to 70. And learning on the job, that's critical for me. And that 6 years, my gosh, I learned a lot. And that's probably where my HR career started, because I was the office manager, sort of corporate services person. So doing a lot of human resources.
And that would be private sector at that time?
Yes.
So you were there 6 years. It went from 2 solicitors up to 70 people in the office. Where did you go from there?
All of the experience that I got with the human resources side of things, and frankly making up policy on the fly, I then saw a job advertised which sounded very, very similar to what I'd done, which was actually the Public Defender Service. That's where I first met you. And I was recruited into the Birmingham office to be their sort of quality manager. That was my first entrance into a civil service job, and that would have been 2001.
So that was 20 years ago, and you'd gone from private to public sector. So then where did you move from there?
I think what was critical for me with that was it was into the civil service, into public sector, and the opportunities that the civil service gives you. They've got 450,000 employees, and it opens up a whole new world. I was in my job in the Public Defender Service. I absolutely loved it. Time moved on. You eventually moved on from that role to a different role. I was then responsible for doing stuff across all of the offices. I was the first non-lawyer in that role in the Public Defender Service to manage the lawyers directly in one of the offices, which was interesting, and really put me in some good stead for my future career of managing technical people. But what it did was it gave me opportunity through the rest of the Ministry of Justice, and I applied for the talent programme that we launched. And on the back of that, I got a couple of jobs within the Legal Services Commission, but then we had a couple of real issues. And I guess this comes down to one of my big learnings through my career, which is I'd started off in HR, in human resources. So I started off doing personnel work, whatever. But that gradually morphed, and I found myself in leadership positions which were very much more general. So I moved from there. I guess that the next biggest job to talk about would be when I became Director of Criminal Legal Aid. It was a big operational job, processing £1 billion worth of claims with, a big budget to handle. But I guess the reason I applied for it and got it was because I understood how criminal legal aid worked. I understood how the fee schemes worked, and I understood how solicitors interacted with the agency, because I had done that from a practitioner level.
Yes, you'd started off in the private sector offices that dealt with the Legal Services Commission. And while you were talking, I was listening to management experience. How do you manage experts? How do you manage people when you don't have that expertise? I had a similar experience too, and it's very different. You also had to learn how to manage remotely, because the offices were all over England and Wales, weren't they? So all different styles of management. And as you say, the opportunities in the civil service to just move around and learn as you go. We were both lucky, weren't we?
Yeah. I think on the technical, managing technical people, I think it's a combination of trust and respect. I think it's trusting people that we all go to work to want to do a good job. And nobody turns up in the morning wanting to go in and slack. I really fundamentally believe that. And respect people for the technical skills they've got and give them the freedom to apply those in the best way that's going to help the organisation. But also being able to be clear about what value you bring and what your skills and experience is and why you're there. I do a NED role, a non-executive role at the moment for a multi-academy trust. And they've just appointed a chief executive who isn't a head teacher. And it's the same kind of thing. The chief executive doesn't need to know about curriculum and how you change outcomes for children. What they need to know is how to run a business. But they also need to be able to inspire and motivate the head teachers to do the things that they're great at. The longer your career goes on, and I suppose I hate to think about it in hierarchy terms because I'm not a hierarchical person, but the higher you go up in an organisation, the less technical you need to become. You have to shed some of that technical, not shed it, but it becomes less important. And the managing remotely, I think it's been really good to see this pandemic. It's now forced people to do that. And actually, it's simple things. It's about, constant communication. It's about treating people as humans, not just having work transactions, but actually being interested in people, understanding what motivates them. If you're going to make change happen, being clear about why change is happening, or any kind of initiatives, or just taking time to praise, taking time to recognise what the team is up to, and listening, I guess.
Thinking about where you started off then, particularly when you thought learning isn't for me, and fortunately you were sort of picked up, if you like. I don't want to say you were lucky, because I know that you are somebody who's got formidable willpower and strength. But you met the leader of the apprenticeship program, who gave you some advice, and you didn't actually let your start in life define you, did you?
I think I've been really lucky because I've met a few people who've either seen something in me or have known that I was the right person at the right time. And a few of those I would say, so in the Public Defender Service, the head of the service in Birmingham, Lee, he was brilliant. He recognised in me, I was very similar to him. He came to his professional career quite late in life. And I think he recognised that I had this sort of inferiority complex, sort of this thing pulling me back. And he supported me to do an MBA. So I did a master's in business administration. Did it really give me anything else? No, it didn't, but it gave me confidence sometimes that I had a badge to say that I could learn at that level, or, you know, that I wasn't stupid or whatever, because some of those things are the things that keep you awake at night. I was lucky enough to have you, who, you know, you saw there was an issue in Swansea, and you put your trust in me to help fix it, and you gave me the freedom to go down there and do it without scrutiny. You just trusted my judgment and said, I'm here if you need anything. And when you moved on, you also gave me your support in going for the job. And I also remember when I was doing my dissertation for my MBA, it was about, we were introducing the balanced scorecard
Oh, yes.
into the PDS at the time. And I had a way, I'm quite headstrong, as I've said. I had a way that I thought we should be implementing the balanced scorecard. You knew that it wouldn't work. And you didn't tell me that won't work, Jane. You coached me, and I was still confident that the way I was going to approach it was the right thing. But you let me try and you let me fail, but you supported me. And I think, and we ended up doing it the way that you were trying to suggest. But that's not because you battered me over the head with it. It's because you coached. I made a decision, but you were there to support and guide me afterwards. It wasn't a big thing, but actually that's how people learn. You learn from mistakes. You have to try things. You can't just keep giving people the answer. People have to try for themselves, experiment, take risks, but know that no matter what happens, they've got a support network somewhere, whether that's in their workplace or whether that's in their professional workspace or whether that's at home. You know, knowing that you've got the proper support network is the thing that overcomes all of those imposter syndrome moments.
Yes, we all have imposter syndrome. And again, I can hear a similarity, because when I went into the civil service and I went back after having my children, I always thought, oh, everybody else has got a degree. Oh, maybe I should have done a degree at the right time. And York University got together with the Department of Social Security and came up with this. They didn't say an MBA, they called it an MA in Social Policy and Social Security Management. And I went for it. And I can remember going, I had to go away for a week to York University. And I rang up every night saying, can I come home? Everybody's better than me. I just can't manage this. But as you said, once you get it, you think, okay, I'm at the same level as everybody else. And that imposter syndrome calms down a little bit. So we've got, don't let your start in life define you. Everybody's got this imposter syndrome. The big difference is, can we learn to live with it and manage it? And you've talked about how you learn through experience, and now you're allowing other people to learn through experience. So where did you move on to after the Legal Services Commission? Because this is where we parted ways, I guess. In fact, I might have left before you did.
Yeah, so I did the Director of Criminal Legal Aid job, which was brilliant. It was the best job in the world. I loved it. I was based in Nottingham, then another city in the centre of England, where you're from. And I wouldn't have left that job, I don't think, but I met my husband. And so the distance of where we lived wasn't really compatible. So I asked for a transfer. I mean, as it happened, we had a pretty awful situation happen at the time where there was a problem with our accounts. And I guess this is another thing. It's what do you want to be known for in your career, or what are your strengths? I always used to say that I was a troubleshooter. And I think the thing going down to Swansea to help out, it's always been, I've always liked to use my HR skills to perhaps hear grievances or disciplinaries or deal with situations that contributed to the organisation but wouldn't have been in my job description. And so this problem came up, and I was asked to lead the programme of work to do that. I knew nothing. It was all to do with audit and assurance. I knew nothing about either of those things. But what I did know was that I understood the world of legal aid, and I understood the world of fixing things. And I also had the confidence of my boss. So I did that for about a year, and it was a tremendous success. We went from having £70 million worth of error to about 10, which was a no mean feat and tremendous success. But I had a career conversation with my boss at the time, and he said, look, you've outgrown this department, you need to go somewhere else. And that was an opportunity for going to a different place in government. Not sure I should name it, but I will. So I chose at that point to go to the Cabinet Office, so the centre of government. And I went there for 9 months, and I loved the job. I hated the culture. I didn't really thrive there. People seemed to be only going into the Cabinet Office to get a promotion, and they would do a project, they deliver a project, and they'd walk away. I'm probably overemphasising here, and I'm sure this wasn't everybody, but it felt to me at the time that projects would get delivered, people would walk away saying, oh, I did this fantastic work and delivered this project, aren't I marvellous? They'd get their promotion, they'd go somewhere else, and within 10 minutes the project had completely failed and, you know, wasn't delivering what it was supposed to do. So it didn't feel a very collaborative, supportive place. And I think, as I said right at the beginning, that's really important to me, that sense of team. It's the only time in my career, and I think I'll tell you exactly the way that this morning went. I woke up one morning, I had a shower, my husband had his shower, he came into the bedroom and said, Jane, get out of bed. I'd gone back to bed, and he said, you need to go to work. And I said, I can't go to work. If I do, I will say or do something which is unrecoverable. I said, we're going on holiday in 3 days' time, and I'm not going into the office between now and then. And when I come back, I'm going to have a plan. And that's what I did, because I knew that I had reached rock bottom working there. It wasn't good for me. I wasn't good for them. It was very hard, because I'd always prided myself on being quite a high achieving person. But there was a cultural mismatch. The leadership didn't really set the right tone for me, and it felt the wrong place for me. And so, yeah, we went to Italy for a week, and I came back and I'd hatched a plan, and I then reached out and contacted everybody I knew that I thought could be helpful to see where else I might go in the civil service. And lo and behold, somebody that I had worked with in the Cabinet Office said, yeah, we've got this job at the Home Office. It's working in human resources, so I'm not sure if you're interested. And I said, well, I am actually qualified in human resources, because I'd actually done a degree level qualification when I was working in private practice. And they said, well, you know, that doesn't really matter. It's an operational job. We want you to fix our executive recruitment. And so that's where I ended up. I ended up in the Home Office, and I was HR director there for 2.5 years before I left the civil service. And I thoroughly loved every minute of that job. It was hard work, but it was really enjoyable.
One thing there, you got back and you rang everybody that you knew. When we're helping people find work, it's very rarely do you find it by sitting and completing 200 applications online. It's who you know, isn't it? And
absolutely.
I've just finished a book with the Aspiring Leaders Group, How Women Rise. And one of those is saying women are great at networking, building relationships, but we're not so good at leveraging those contacts. But you've just given a great example of where you leveraged.
100%, because women feel that there's a thing with women where they tend to think that it's not honest or it's not authentic or whatever to ask for that help, because it feels like you're I don't know, like you're getting around the processes or whatever. This comes down to basic mentoring. That's all it is. It's what men And I don't want to be sexist, I'm not trying to be, but there are differences, like you say, in how women and men approach things. And it is statistically proven that men have far more mentoring relationships than women do. There are far more men that have a mentor. And mentoring is one of the single biggest unlockers to progress in your career. It really is. Having someone that can be your champion, that can give you, I don't know, contacts or leads to follow, or, you know, all of those sorts of things. And this was somebody that I'd worked with. They'd seen me in action. They knew what I was known for. They knew what I could do and what I could deliver. And so it was really quite an easy sell.
So I know that you've moved again, at least twice since then. So you did 2 years at the Home Office. Where did you go then?
So at the Home Office, they were running a fast track scheme for HR people to become chief people officers in government. And actually, it was quite interesting because I applied for it, and my boss was actually on holiday at the time. So one of the other directors was managing the programme. And he said, "Oh, I'm not going to put you forward, Jane, because you've not got deep HR expertise. You've done different things in your career, and what we're looking for is people with deep HR experience." I fundamentally disagree with that view, by the way, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And so I happened to be having coaching at the time, and I discussed it with my coach. And it was a revelation, actually. I decided at that point that it wasn't about not going on a course. Actually, we talked about, but is that what you really want? Do you really want to be a chief people officer in government? And I didn't. I just wanted another badge. I just wanted to go on another talent programme and be chosen and do something else. And that's not the right thing, actually. The right thing for me was, we actually found the next thing that I needed to do, which was to leave government. So I was on a leadership programme. I did go on a different one, and it was a senior women's leadership programme. And that was cross-sector, private and industry, private and public, with the Whitehall Industry Group, which is a very big organisation in the UK, which is great. And I would say that's the single most effective intervention in my career. And as part of that, they encouraged us to go and speak to senior female leaders. And my husband said, "Oh, come and speak to the HR director at the Financial Conduct Authority. You'll really like her." So I went to have a cup of coffee with her, and within 10 minutes, she offered me a job. So I turned my back on a 15-year career in the civil service and went to join a regulator in a sector I knew nothing about. So I went to the Financial Conduct Authority, and I did 3.5 years there before I moved to the current job I'm in. And I will go back to that person saying, you know, you need deep HR experience. I actually don't believe, well, I think there are some fantastic HR leaders out there, but I think business experience is really, really good to have in your toolkit. I think now, sitting as a member of the executive team, the fact that I can talk about audit and assurance, and I can read a set of accounts, and I can talk from having run a large operation, and I also know the people and legal risks related to employment law, I think it's not a bad skill set to have.
Absolutely. It's not a bad skill set to have. So knowing a little bit then about a lot, as you were talking about all of your moves, you've kept repeating that, so I moved into yet another thing that I didn't actually know anything about. And so you added something to your toolkit. And then you moved away from that into your current role at the Civil Aviation Authority.
Yeah, that wasn't conscious. I was quite enjoying the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority. To be honest, I didn't enjoy it at the beginning. I went there and I got a 50% uplift in my salary because the civil service doesn't pay that well. And I was probably working 2 or 3 levels below what I'd been working at in the civil service. to be honest, because the civil service jobs are just so big. And actually, when I was looking to find a new job, I found that people almost didn't believe me when I said what the job was that I was doing in the civil service. It was huge.
Yes.
And yeah, I was enjoying the Financial Conduct Authority. We'd just moved everybody from the headquarters in Canary Wharf to East London, which was a big cultural change programme, and actually was very focused on well-being, having the new building focused on well-being. I really enjoyed that project. And then I think probably for the first time in my career, I was headhunted then. Somebody actually came to me and said, here's a job at the Civil Aviation Authority, you'd be really good for it. And I just decided it was too big for me. I didn't engage with the headhunters at all. And then they just kept ringing me. And I spoke to my husband one evening and I said, I'm going to ring them tomorrow and just tell them I'm not interested. And I don't know what made me do it, but I opened the job description just before I was going to ring them. And everything on the job description I felt I could do. So I thought, do you know what? When I got interviewed at the FCA for the job leading the cultural change programme, I've made a bit of a mess of the interview because I hadn't actually had that many interviews over the years. So I thought, I know, I'll go for a bit of interview practice. I'll just go along. Nothing to lose. And I went for the first interview and I met the chief executive, and I was blown away by how people focused he is. And I just then desperately wanted to work for him. And then I was lucky enough to, get the job. And so found myself now in the aviation industry with absolutely no experience of that, but lots of HR experience and leadership experience, and a really good chief executive who's very down to earth and was very, very supportive. And started there in, March 2019.
Almost a year under your belt then before the pandemic hit.
Yeah, but things don't always turn out that way though, do they? So I started in March, and by September I'd been deployed to Birmingham Airport for 2 weeks to run the repatriation of Thomas Cook passengers back to the UK. So not an HR job at all, but in times of real serious issues for the organisation, and this was the biggest civil repatriation since World War II. So we were all dispatched to different airports, and I decided that with my accent it might be quite nice to go back to Birmingham for a bit. And it was an absolute joy to be stood on a concourse welcoming people back from a terrible situation where they were worried that they might be stranded in a foreign country. They were undergoing, hotels were locking them in the hotel before their bills were paid. But actually to be the smiling face and welcoming people back and seeing the relief was an honour. So I did 24/7 work on that. I mean, I tell you, the first thing I had to do when I arrived at the airport was to tell 300 people that they weren't going on the holiday that they turned up to the airport expecting to go on at 5 o'clock in the morning. That was not a pleasant task to do. And then December, I was back up there doing the same thing when Flybe went into administration. And then as soon as I knew it, the pandemic had hit. And then I've been leading our internal response to COVID during the pandemic. And whilst it is hard for everybody, I think running a human resources department, it's been especially hard. We are the caring heart of the organisation, and I've got probably a better gender mix and age demographic in my team than much of the rest of the organisation, given we're quite a technical one. So I had lots of my team members are mothers, fathers, carers, and they were trying to look after their own responsibilities as well as caring for the welfare of 1,400 people in the organisation, and that has been a significant ask.
And the word that you used earlier on, that you consider yourself a troubleshooter, I mean, that is absolutely what your role seems to be. It continues to be, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, if I haven't got a problem to sort out, I'll make one.
Welcoming people back, repatriation, it reminded me what a good friend you are. And I know that we're going to move on to talk about how you give back. But I will never forget when I was moving to France and I had this idea I was going to have my eyes lasered before I came over here. And of course, when you decide to have both eyes lasered on the same day, you certainly can't drive. So you said, I'll pick you up and you can stay with me. And can you remember what you said when you walked in? I was feeling a bit, I couldn't see a thing with these big cotton wool pads on my eyes. And you walked in and I thought, oh, she'll comfort me.
Yeah. I just told you looked like the Fly. Jeff Goldblum in The Fly.
And actually, that was just what I needed. That's you giving back as a friend, but I know that you do a lot to give back to many other people. So how important is that to you?
Hugely. I've had the luxury of having a number of mentors, sponsors, just cheerleaders throughout my career. So I've done various things, and it just depends. It's also a part of learning. I want to hear other people's perspectives. I'm interested in people and people's lived experiences. I've done a whole range of things. So I used to be a coach for an organisation called Teach First because there was a lack of teachers. But latterly, I guess I've become a bit more focused on coaching young women in their careers. So I talk about the Whitehall Industry Group and the Senior Women's Leadership Programme that I did with them. I'm a mentor for them. So every programme that they do, I'm always really keen to have a mentee. And I've gone onto their broader mentoring framework now. So I do some of that. I'm a member of the steering group for the Women in Aviation and Aerospace. This is about improving the diversity in the aviation industry, which is sadly lacking. And so being on the steering group, I also then mentor on a platform called Alta, which is supposed to be about improving the opportunities for women, and particularly it's around STEM subjects. Now, I know nothing about that, and if it's somebody looking to be a pilot or whatever, I know nothing. But actually, there are so many other jobs in aviation. It isn't all about flying or engineers. And certainly moving into things like space and technology, there are so many more opportunities. So whatever I can do, I'll always seek to do that. I mean, somebody said to me the other day, they had a chemistry conversation with me to see if we matched to be a mentor. And I think her primary concern was, but you've already got like 3 or 4. How can you fit me in? I'm just like, well, I just will, because it's important and I'll make time for it. That's as well as any mentoring I do in the organisation. So I'll quite often just randomly reach out to somebody in the organisation who I know maybe just needs that bit of a career conversation. I actually went into the office a few weeks ago to see somebody just to talk to her about her next steps. I've got 2 daughters at university. I want other people to do the same things for them. Like I said, it's so easy to make something happen for somebody, to open a door, and it makes you feel good, but you can't begin to imagine how much it moves them on. I can't remember is it Maya Angelou who said people forget what you said or what you did, but it's how they remember how it made you feel. And I think I had a brilliant one this week, actually. The person I'm mentoring from the Senior Women's Leadership Group said to me, oh, I mentioned your name to somebody the other day. And she said, not the Jane Cosgrove. I was like, oh, yeah, people quite often have that reaction. And it turns out, actually, she was somebody that I'd worked with in the legal aid agency, 20 years ago. It must be 15, 20 years ago. And she'd raised a grievance and I dealt with her grievance, and she said to this person, just the respect and the integrity and the thoroughness of the investigation, I'd be delighted to get back in touch. And she sent me a LinkedIn request, and so we've been having a good old chat on LinkedIn.
And that's the measure of somebody, isn't it? The measure of if you're going through a really difficult thing with somebody, like a complaint or a grievance, or if you downsize in an organization, if the respect of the people is still there, then you know that you've done it right, I think.
Yeah. But then I'm no angel. I'm sure there are plenty of instances where people would say, she's walked past me, she's been quite dismissive, because sometimes, and I remember a time in the public defender service, somebody that worked there, she couldn't get childcare. We had a meeting, she brought her children in, and I shut the door because I was working on something that was really, it was budgets, and I had to concentrate. And I think she stewed on it for about a week. And then she said to me, did I upset you with the children making too much noise? And I was like, oh my word, no, I just needed to concentrate. And so it's really difficult. You know, you do things and you don't intend to do anything at all. I try and be as straightforward as I can with people and say to them, you know, if I've got something to say, if there's some feedback you need to hear, you will get it. It won't be nasty. It will be said in a hopefully a way that you can build from it.
That's
but
true.
Please, if you feel like there's something that I'm not saying, you do need to say it to me.
That's true. And it's a breath of fresh air, Jane, to work with people who do just have straightforward communication. You don't have to make assumptions about what you're thinking or what you're feeling. I wonder if you could give some advice, because I'm often asked, how do I find a mentor? And I suppose they're meaning a mentor with similar skills to develop the skills, or in that particular sector. What would you advise? How did you find yours?
Oh, I think most of mine were through work, and they were people that were either a boss or someone that I admired or that sort of thing. Some of it is professional development sometimes. Some of it, I would say, I think the professional areas, so like I'm a member of the Chartered Institute for Personnel and Development. So some of those areas and some of the sort of technical or membership groups are really starting to see now the benefits of mentoring and coaching. So quite often these schemes might pop up and you just won't be aware. I think there's something there around being curious. LinkedIn, you know, use LinkedIn, look at people, contact people. I know we all get really random LinkedIn requests, and I'm quite choosy sometimes because you know, certainly on sales things, I don't accept them. But I would say, you know, take a chance when there are networking events going on. And this is the brilliant thing with the pandemic at the moment, actually, because the networking events are so much more inclusive in a way. You can have so many more people. You know, my daughter went for an internship, and normally it would be 30 people. I think there were about 3,000 on it when she was a bit disappointed because she felt it just felt a bit diluted. But actually, the vast majority of those people would never have had an opportunity to have an internship with a law firm of that calibre. So I think it's looking at some of these online opportunities that you get, and when you're in meetings, if you see someone doing things that you like, don't be afraid to reach out in your professional network and just say to somebody, I really admired how you did that in that meeting. Would you mind giving me, you know, half an hour of your time for a few months, once a month? Most people will do it. You put me onto a book, Jill, years ago, and I go back to it as a staple. Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, by Susan Jeffers.
That prompted so many of my actions. Yes,
I bought that book for both. I bought that book for both of my daughters, and I know you bought it for your daughter, and I've recommended that to so many women. And it really is, just ask. People are surprisingly generous with their time, with their advice, with their information.
But that's true. And like you say, people are busy, we are choosy. But if somebody comes and says something reasonable, like, could you find half an hour once a month? The answer is probably yes. And I had somebody the other day in India who she sent me 7 questions. before the meeting. So if you do get a mentor, then come prepared. Don't arrive and then, well, what would you like to ask me? Well, I haven't really thought about it. So we don't mind giving our time, but come prepared, I think.
That's right. And if we can't spare our time, quite often we might know somebody else that might be able to be a help.
That's right. That's right. We know,
but
who will.
Sign up for events, do whatever you can, keep looking at who are the people leading in your area, of expertise, or the kind of industry or sector you'd want to get into. Because quite often they'll be giving keynote speeches. You can start to look at organisations, follow certain organisations on Twitter and LinkedIn and whatever. Just keep abreast of what organisations are doing.
Thank you. I know that will be useful. So the takeaways then, the takeaways for people, I know you sent me some top tips. Do you want to go through them?
You start in life, any knockbacks or anything like that, don't let it hold you back. Just keep trying, keep learning. Take that as a bit of that didn't work out very well. Like I say about the Cabinet Office, that could be seen as a failure. No, it wasn't. It just didn't fit. Move on and be a success. I think be the best you. Don't try and be somebody else. Be authentic. My mum used to say to me, bless her, she was Scottish and had a very, very thick Scottish accent. And in fact, people used to think she was a man on the phone. She used to say, people only lose their accent if they want to. And it's a bit like that with who you are. Don't try and mould yourself into somebody else. Be the best you can. I do know that workplaces shape people. So I know that my way of thinking now, where I am, is actually very different to where I was at the Home Office or the Financial Conduct Authority, because I've got a chief executive who's very focused on the people. And so I can be more creative rather than being bound by the rules, which I was in those other two organisations. Watch other people, read, be curious, but only implement things that actually fit with how you are. I think the imposter syndrome piece, we've all got it. You just have to learn to live with it and manage it. Sorry, that sounds a bit COVID, doesn't it? It's going to be here forever. We just have to live with it. Just don't beat yourself up about things. Try and dust yourself off, move on. Sitting in a situation, do take those moments to speak to that little voice in your head that's saying you're not worthy, because that's not right. And the other thing, knowing a little about a lot is actually quite helpful. So where I am now, I can contribute on a range of things. I'm not saying I'm an expert on any of them, but I can actually ask some questions that I think are the right kind of questions. But actually, there's also that piece about not knowing enough is good, because it allows you to let the people who do know a lot about those subjects to flourish and to actually deliver some great stuff. It's amazing what people deliver when you just give them the space to do it.
And I think you were just saying there before my partner interrupted, the flow, that's the beauty of doing a podcast at home, that somebody said to you, Jane, I don't know why you contribute on a subject you know nothing about. And so what was your response to that?
Well, that's right. It was an end of year review, and I asked for some feedback from my peers, and he was one of the technical people around the table, and it was at the Financial Conduct Authority, and he said, you comment on regulation and how the approach that we're going to take to regulation. I don't know why you think you should have an opinion on that, because you're in HR. He'd never asked me what I'd done before. And actually, what we did in this public defender service in legal aid, there was a form of regulation in that, and nothing's unique. And that's the thing. Allow everybody a voice around the table, not just the experts, and you will come to much better conclusions.
And there are two things there. First of all, don't make an assumption that you know somebody's background. But the second thing is that it's great to ask questions from a beginner's mindset, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Because you're seeing something from a different point of view that the experts will really have their head full of their expertise.
Absolutely. I did trip myself up earlier in my career because I used to give permission to people to think I was stupid, because I would say, it might just be me being a bit blonde, or I'm being a bit stupid. I do still say that occasionally, but not as much as I used to. And that's when I got told by my boss, but Jane, you're giving people permission to think you're stupid. Rephrase it in the, can you just tell me a bit more about that? Can you explain that in simpler terms? If I was the man on the street, how might I hear that?
And that's also in the book, How Women Rise, that we do use extra words and we ask for permission. And
then the last thing I'd say is give back. I'm incredibly fortunate to have achieved what I've achieved in my career. I love my job. I look forward to work every day. And if I can help anybody to do that, whether it's coaching, mentoring, just recommending things to do, I must say I'm more of a mentor than a coach. I like to give advice. I'm not as good at listening as I would aspire to be. I'm working on it constantly. And I think that's the other thing, recognise that none of us is a finished product. When you actually give to other people, you also learn. We use the term reciprocal mentoring in our workplace because that's what it is. It's not reverse mentoring, it's reciprocal, because each party will always learn something.
Oh, I like that. That's so much better than reverse mentoring. Reciprocal. So Jane Cosgrove, thank you so much for this. Thank you so much on a personal level for your 20 years of support, but thank you for doing this podcast. I know that so many of the things that you've gone through and that you've talked about will help a lot of people out there. So thank you for coming.
Thank you, Jill. It's been a delight, and I hope even one person can get something out of it.
We could break into song if I could help somebody. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.